All right, so let's take a look at some projects today. One, of course, I think you guys all know very well, and that is Polygon. And a lot of things are happening within the Polygon network, and I think the way to really dive into that is to actually dive in with someone who knows what's happening. So today it's going to be a good one. You don't want to miss it. My name is Paul Boiron. Welcome back into TechPath. Joining me today is Marc Boiron, who is the Chief Executive Officer over at Polygon Labs. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me here.
All right, so Marc, let's get into a few topics. We have a whole line list of things that we want to ask you today, but obviously I think the big one that we want to dive into first is look a little bit around the 2.0 rollout, really what you guys are doing, the plan, the strategy, how you guys are taking this from where Polygon was once and is going now into the future. Can you kind of give us an update?
Yeah, so I think mid-year we laid out kind of the Polygon 2.0 strategy. And basically what that is the strategy that is, in our view, the end state of what blockchains need to be. We really need blockchains to be two things. We need them to scale, just like the internet. So effectively, they need to be able to scale unlimited amounts. Second, we need them to be interconnected so that they feel like one thing. You don't feel like you're in a different internet depending on what site that you go to. And so historically what Polygon has really been one network, which was Polygon Proof of Stake Network. We launched earlier this year, Polygon ZK-VM, which is a true kind of layer 2 network. And essentially what we're envisioning with Polygon 2.0 is that those two networks, along with several other networks that can be created using the Polygon Chain Development Kits, can all be interconnected as one. And effectively what this means is that when we need to scale more, a chain can be rolled up using the chain, can be created using the Chain Development Kit. And then it will end up being interconnected with all the other chains so that when you want to transact and you say, hey, there's some asset on chain A and I am sitting on chain B, you can actually transact with the assets from chain A on chain B, making it feel like one network.
So obviously interoperability there. When you talk about these CDKs and the success you've had so far, I was looking at some of the projects that you guys are using or partnered with, I guess, on the CDK side. Flipkart, so many people may not know who that is, but that's a major retail e-commerce platform. Immutable, obviously, everybody that follows our channel knows that. OKX, Genesis Pay, Palm Network. Who else do we have in here that I thought was interesting? WireX is in here, Nubank. So quite a few around the Chain Development Kit. So lots happening there. Can you talk about who else potentially would be going in this direction? Because these are some majors that could really have an impact on all sorts of industries. Is there any particular area you guys are seeing most growth in?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, anyone who has an application that needs a network where they actually control that environment, right? And historically in blockchain networks, whether you're on Ethereum or Polygon POS, you don't actually get to control that environment, right? You're subject to gas fees from other applications, speed limitations that might happen due to throughput being throttled from other applications. And some like Polygon POS handle those very, very well, but they're not unimpacted by those. And also you want to create an environment that has control over what kind of gas you use to pay fees on the network, for example. And so the interest that we're seeing is really in a broad range of applications who are saying, we want to be able to control cost, we want to be able to control speed, and we want to make sure that we can control that environment and how people interact with it. And so ultimately, that ends up meaning that you see a lot of gaming projects using the Chain Development Kit, DeFi projects, especially once they've grown and they don't want to be impacted by that, using it. And then enterprises, whether that's on kind of the consumer side, and again, they want a good consumer experience, or on the tokenization side, around tokenization of assets. So there's a broad range of areas where we're seeing kind of the desire for kind of their own chain with the Chain Development Kit.
Yeah, well, we know of other blockchains out there that have similar strategies around this for things like subnets, et cetera. You look at gaming, and as you know, our channel talks to a lot of game founders. We get into gaming quite deep. One thing that I've noticed in this cycle, as opposed to last cycle, because last cycle I feel like it was a lot of games that were really just starting to test things. Now we're actually seeing games that are utilizing real functionality within these blockchains. And one thing that we've noticed is that we've seen a handful of games starting to move around. With that being the case, the one scenario that has played out has been the issue of blockchains maybe not dealing with their challenges direct, because, whether we'll call it customer support for blockchain, if there is such a thing. But the point is that what is Polygon doing to help kind of restore that faith, but also building on getting more game devs really diving into the Polygon ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think on that first one, Polygon CDK is really key to this, which is that if you want to create the best user experience as the developer of a game, what you want to do that is you want to actually control that experience. And Polygon CDK allows you to do that. And so you can ensure that when a user runs into an issue, you are running that network at that point, and you actually have the ability to deal with it. Now, the way a lot of these chain development kits get launched is actually through what we refer to as roll-up as a service providers or implementation providers. Effectively, these are third-party providers who have very good technical knowledge of Polygon CDK, for example, and they will actually run that infrastructure and be able to deal with the issues that come up with it. And so being able to control that environment is a big benefit of Polygon CDK. On top of that, one of the things that we've done is we've worked very closely with Immutable, which is launching Immutable ZK with Polygon CDK. And one of the benefits of that is that they have a strong gaming kind of middleware solution that ends up being very useful. And while they end up on Immutable ZK, one of the benefits of the chain development kit is that ends up bringing everyone into that same ecosystem together.
Right.
When everything gets connected, all these games will be able to essentially talk to each other, transact cross-chain. And so Immutable ends up working very closely with us on continuing to develop a very strong user experience that developers can carry forward for the games, for the gamers.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions in that vein, with especially the Immutable Polygon partnership. We saw this, we thought this would be a big part of this. We've had, and we follow Ryan Watt, your former gaming lead, and you look at Polygon and you think, well, the partnership, Ryan departing, all of that kind of thing. Does that mean Polygon is slowing down in that sector, or is it really just going more all in with your partnership with IMX?
Yeah, and I think the latter is the accurate way of looking at this. From our perspective, we don't differentiate between whether a game ends up on Polygon POS, whether it creates its own chain, or whether it ends up on Immutable ZKVM. So from our perspective, every single game that ends up on Immutable ZKVM is a benefit to the Polygon ecosystem, and we actually want that to happen. And so it's not like we're kind of giving up the gaming space. It's just that we view it as helping Immutable and others in the ecosystem as well. It's not just Immutable, but Immutable is the one that has been most successful. Helping them grow in the Polygon ecosystem is exactly what we want to do, and we've been successful in doing that. And Immutable has been successful also in helping carry that out.
With these chain development kits, you guys have OKX on there, which is an exchange. You look at what Coinbase has done with Base. Why do you think maybe they chose to go the optimism route as opposed to maybe jumping in and building on Polygon, going this direction? Because I would think that you want to draw as many of those, especially those market leaders, into Polygon as possible.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we first created Polygon ZKVM, which is effectively the base for what Polygon CDK is, it was at a time when we weren't actually focused on kind of growing the whole ecosystem of chains. And so at a time when Base was making that decision, we were still in a phase where we were really growing the security and reliability of that base chain that we wanted to use for Polygon CDK. So when it was making its decision, Polygon CDK wasn't really even a choice. And so I think since then, when you then see the next exchange launch, When Polygon CDK is available, what you see is OKX choosing to launch X1, which we're super excited about.
I'm looking at your website here, just on the CDK section, tools, build your dApp, the starter kit, the Truffle Polygon box, you know, the covalent API, et cetera. So it's a pretty good toolkit in terms of really helping these developers get moving on this. This is good now that it is launched. With this being the case, and what you know of the market as it is right now, how do you guys think this is going to look if you could forecast this? And I'm sure you have plans, but if you look at your roadmap, where do you expect this to be in, say, the next 12 months in terms of partnerships, opportunities, et cetera?
Yeah, this is the thing I'm most excited talking about is the future of what Polygon ultimately looks like. When we think of it from a protocol perspective, what we end up having in probably 6 to 8 months from now is the interoperability layer, that layer that's going to connect all of these chains together. Mm-hmm. And the reason why that's so exciting from a development perspective is because that'll be the first time where you actually get the ability to launch your own chain, scale infinitely, and finally share in liquidity in a very kind of smooth and reliable way, in a way that you haven't been able to in any other environment. So in the next 9 months or so, I think that's what we're going to see. And basically after that point, we're just talking about optimizing what already exists. In terms of the ecosystem, I think one of the more exciting things about the Chain Development Kit and this interoperability layer is it naturally brings all of these ecosystems that could be separate and otherwise would be separate together into one. So when we look at a company that chooses to launch Chain Development Kit, like OKX, we don't view them as just doing their own thing. What we view them as coming to become part of an ecosystem that is going to help everyone else grow. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you start bringing 100, 200, 500 chains together, you could view them all as working on their own and developing with Polygon CDK and just using the technology that exists there. But instead, the way that we see it is that the technology is really what brings everybody together from a technical perspective. But that really what's happening like outside of that is a whole community that is getting built that is saying, we believe this technology is the best one, is the future, and is the one that we want to rely on. And so let's all help each other win. And so we've got a community of builders. So OKX has many engineers who are working on developing Polygon CDK. Immutable is working in there. Canto is working in there. And what you see is everybody working on the same code base and helping develop it further and faster. And then coming together and saying, how do we help each other grow? Because ultimately, when OKX's X1 chain grows and has a lot of liquidity on it, that ends up helping something like Immutable ZKVM that can share in the liquidity that exists over there. So really, it's about bringing together all of these different chains that end up existing. And we're pretty confident that by the end of 2024, we're likely to see over 100 chains existing in the kind of Polygon CDK ecosystem.
Over 100. So that would be significant growth. And I look at other projects out there that are utilizing this sort of technology where, the developers kind of own their own, stack, and they're growing, but they're not growing at that pace. Do you feel like the market is in a position now where the game devs are back, the utility products are back at a state in which they can really start to accelerate in terms of growth?
Yeah, I think part of it is that, and part of it is the infrastructure is ready for that. As I was mentioning, we now, with Polygon CDK, we've had a implementation provider spin one up, like a chain up, in as little as 10 minutes. Now, that's a very basic implementation, but the general idea is still true, which is it's very easy to spin up a new chain. So when you think about it from an enterprise's perspective or a DeFi protocol's perspective, and they're trying to decide, should I spin up my own chain and actually be able to control this environment and not be subject to the impact of other applications, the decision starts to become a lot easier when the legwork is light compared to what has historically existed. If we go to something like the Cosmos ecosystem, which I think everyone at Polygon has a ton of respect for because they've done like a great job of building like a strong SDK over there. But what you see is chains that very much exist on their own. They are hard to spin up, take a lot of time. That is something that makes it really hard for people to actually adopt it in a way that's very different from the Chain Development Kit, which can be developed, which can be used very easily.
Yeah. All right. So we have a lot of people that are in the industry that watch our show. We have a lot of communication with many of the top projects out there, and then we do we have our own consulting business where we work with brands that are trying to implement blockchain services, projects, and strategies around Web3. And you look at all of those and you think, all right, there's a couple of market leaders that are starting to show themselves here. You look at the subnets of what's happening on Avalanche. You look at your Supernets. Why would sell me on why Polygon would be the choice if I was, whether I'm a brand, a game dev, a project builder, whatever it might be?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when you look at Polygon CDK and you're trying to make a decision on should I use Polygon CDK or should I use the application that exists or the development kit that exists elsewhere, the reason you ultimately come to Polygon is a few reasons. One is Polygon CDK, when it's actually deployed, is super cheap. Okay, that's actually relatively equal to what you get in other environments. But on top of that, what you get is you also get something that has very high throughput. Okay, I'd argue that most other environments would say the same thing. What you definitely get that you don't get elsewhere is a high level of security. The nature of Polygon CDK is that it is a validity proof system using ZK technology to secure it.
Right.
And that is much more secure technology than what you get elsewhere. And it goes right back with all transactions ending up on Ethereum. And so what you get is that security from Ethereum, while the speed and the cost of being on the Polygon CDK. So that's I'll call those like table stakes. Like everyone needs to have that. Unfortunately,
Sure.
Not all of them have that same security. But what really gets interesting is that you really want to be able to interact with all of these other chains. Ultimately, when you fast forward and you say, I'm going to build my own chain, you start thinking, oh my gosh, I have to build all the infrastructure. I have to bring all the liquidity there. I need to bring all the applications there. So it's not just about the technology. It's like an entire ecosystem that needs to come over there. Well, when we roll out the interoperability layer, everything changes at that point in time because you no longer need to build all of those different components because you can share. You don't need to go and say, hey, how do I get liquidity onto my chain? You can just share in the liquidity that already exists on, for example, Polygon POS when it's upgraded to a Validium or on Polygon ZK VM or in any of the other CDK chains that exist out there. And so that ability is a game changer that does not exist elsewhere and frankly doesn't have a roadmap for existing in other ecosystems, given the ZK technology that will underpin all of the interconnectivity between these chains.
All right, so I think that's a good argument. The scenario that plays out within the business world today is how do we use this? Because these are the questions we get all the time, utility-wise. And I'm looking at, the project like Starbucks. If you look at what Odyssey has done, obviously partner with Polygon within this. But there's many others that are starting to brew up loyalty packages that may also incorporate payments. Back to your point, speed, transactions per second is going to be pretty critical. With that being the case, you look at what Visa has done. Obviously, Visa has selected, I would say, Solana right now as one of the leads there, mainly because of TPS. How does Polygon able to edge that out? Because retailers are most likely going to at some point incorporate e-commerce of some sort. Payments are going to come. And blockchain is going to be right there at that, at that threshold. How would Polygon win that battle?
Yeah, I think we've already seen this play out quite a bit with the choices that companies have made, right? Whether it's Lufthansa launching their loyalty program as well on Polygon, Nike deciding to launch its loyalty adjacent program, or Grab, one of the biggest companies in Southeast Asia, launching effectively a payment system through very kind of innovative NFT vouchers on Polygon. What we've basically seen already is the decision being made that we do have the throughput, the speed, the reliability that you need to build on Polygon. And so I don't think there's really any question about that anymore. The question really comes down to what is the better ecosystem to build in, knowing that in both of those cases, you're going to have speed and reliability that you need and the throughput that you need. And ultimately, when you look at that ecosystem and you look at what Polygon's built up, there's a lot more that can be leveraged between these companies in the Polygon ecosystem than almost anywhere else. And when you then take that one level further and you say, yeah, but what about Polygon CDK? How do they use that? Well, now they actually get to create their own environment where they don't need to worry about it. When you're on another chain, you have to worry about what happens with another application. Now, there are ways to like minimize some impacts of that, but ultimately, as we scale more and more, what we're going to see, and we see it on many chains already, is the impact of many applications that are having a lot of success at the same time, impacting how the chain actually operates. And using Polygon CDK like easily gives confidence to any of these retailers, for example, that they're not going to be impacted on what happens elsewhere. And so they get that cost, that throughput that they need, that security and the reliability that they need without having any of the concerns around being impacted by other applications.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, yes, you're right on all of those major players that have made this leap forward. And I'm liking the concept around CDK because I think when you think about brands, most likely they're going to go the Supernet or a subnet route. Because, you know, just having that capability of control is a very critical component for any kind of major brand retailer, especially. Loyalty being a big factor, payments also playing into this. And when you look at that and you think about where you guys have come so far, I guess the question next is, where are you going in the next year or two? Because I would say that the partnerships have slowed down slightly. Now, part of that's the bear market, but is there something else that you guys are brewing, or is there an alternative here that you can kind of talk about here in terms of growth in the next year or two for where Polygon will be, especially around utility? Utility is the key.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So I took over as CEO about 5 months ago. And at that time, part of the reason for this was a desire to take a somewhat different strategic direction. I think we've done such a good job of capturing what I'll consider like the big brand, the market for big brands, that when somebody is trying to decide where do they launch an application and you're dealing with a kind of more of a bigger enterprise retail type company, Polygon's essentially the default decision at that. It really takes another chain to come in and try to kind of move them over off of Polygon. And as a result of that, the amount of focus that we need to put in that area is significantly decreased. And we're still seeing a significant amount of flow. I mean, frankly, given the bear market, I thought that we were going to be in a very different spot than we are in now. The amount of flow that we see from kind of traditional retailers is very, very high. And what we are trying to do that is different than what we've done in the past is previously when we would talk about these deals and why they would be promoted the way they are, is that we would talk about them as kind of what they are from like a business perspective. And what we're really trying to double down on is helping people realize the benefits of the technology that you get in Polygon. And that's what we're much more focused on right now. And the core reason for this is that we need to be able to scale, not just for kind of the immediate applications that exist today. Like I think right now, if you look at all the applications in Web3 and you said, can Polygon handle that? And the answer is probably, yeah, Polygon can handle all of that. But when you fast forward 10 years from now and you say, is there any blockchain that can handle what we expect to see in 10 years from now? And the answer is yeah, absolutely not. And so we need to actually focus still on that infrastructure and building that out. And that's why we spend so much time talking about Polygon CDK and talking so much less about what was the deal that we just got done. Last thing that I'll say on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I want to kind of challenge you on the 10-year window. I just feel like that's a very long window. I'm more concerned because I think that we're going to see a big leap forward in blockchain utility in this next cycle, basically over the next 24 to 36 months. That's 3 years out. Maybe a 5-year in terms of big adoption curves before it starts to really take off. This is a very critical time. This next 5 years is super critical. I guess that's the window that I'm looking at, because whoever is winning in the next 5, they're going to be the Amazon of the future. But this next few years is really critical. So I think that's to my point. Go ahead and finish your point there.
No, I was just saying, I was going to say, I was simplifying my life by saying 10 years because there was such an obvious window of time. But I think we strongly agree with the idea that probably over the next 3 years is where we're going to see real kind of, let's call it infrastructure fights play out. And then I think you see let's call it consolidation, which in Web3 might be the wrong word, but we can go with it. Consolidation over years 3 to 5 and beyond that. And that's why we're super excited that Polygon CDK is available today. If it was not available and not able to scale in the way that it does today, I think we would be having trouble. But we're not in that spot, and we're in a spot where not only does CDK scale, but in 9 months from now, CDK will scale, and you will have the ability to actually connect all of them together, feeling like one blockchain. And so what we're looking at right now, beyond kind of the big brands, is kind of going back a little bit more to the Web3 kind of roots that we have. And when you look at where is it that a lot of the transactions come from today, they ultimately come from 2 sources: DeFi and payments. That's really where it all comes from. And when you look at the bets that we've been making, we've taken a very long view of things, right? 2 years ago, we were already betting on gaming, and we've only gone stronger there. We're already betting on kind of the brands coming into Web3, and we already are very strong there. And what we actually started focusing on last was the things that have immediate impact today. And so basically what we're saying is, why don't we continue to take that long-term view on gaming and on brands and focus on those? But now let's build out from there and actually focus on some of the Web3 native applications that bring that liquidity, because ultimately that liquidity is going to benefit all of these brands, all of the kind of games. And when we can build that up, now you have a really complete ecosystem that over the next 3 to 5 years, as you say, can flourish with, frankly, nobody else having even close to the same ecosystem across the board, whether it's DeFi or gaming or NFTs or brands or tokenization. When you look at Polygon, you basically say, wow, you're top 3 in every single one of those categories. And that frankly just doesn't exist in another ecosystem. And so continuing to make sure that we build out each of those pieces that ultimately will all leverage each other to get stronger is a really important thing for us to do.
Yeah, I want to stay close on time, but I want to hit a couple of points before we go forward. For those of you watching, make sure and smash the like button. It does help the channel. And we're going to get into the Polygon token, MATIC, and kind of this transition. Before we go there, one last thing I want to hit on the gaming side is Beam. Beam's partnership, obviously, with IMX. We all know this is basically an Avalanche conversion, what we'll see in an ecosystem. Who wins with this kind of deal in terms of gaming?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's a 3-way win. What you see is better infrastructure that is available in that immutable and Polygon kind of ecosystem. As between Polygon and immutable, as we were talking about earlier, there's a very win-win relationship there, because the technology that's being used ultimately is Polygon CDK. But it's all happening within that immutable ecosystem, right? Where they've built their passport wallet and their kind of order book that gets shared across the entire immutable ecosystem. So they get those benefits of the tools that they've built specific to gaming being used. And we end up getting the benefit of all these new games coming and using Polygon technology that ultimately ends up being interconnected with all of the other Polygon networks and helping it grow as a whole. And so to me, this is a very clear 3-way win with just better infrastructure, good tooling, and then good core infrastructure being available.
All right. I expect you to say that, but everybody wins on that. But okay, we'll go with that. I want to hit on a few points here, and that is we're going to talk about tokenization for a minute, because there's some things happening, within the tokenized asset world. And I was looking at your notes here. private equity tokenization adoption continuing. And well, listen, we're seeing this already. It's happening in other places. Tokenization is a real thing. I was looking at just treasuries right here. This coming from the RWA website. The tokenized treasury continues to climb, so we're continuing to see this as a move. And granted, Polygon is involved here, but Franklin Templeton obviously leading there with Stellar, Solana's in here, ETH, etc. This is a big area of growth here. What is your future outlook for tokenized securities, especially around the use case for Polygon?
Yeah, it's an area that we've been focused on, and I think quite a bit ahead of others. I think Avalanche does well in tokenization as well, but beyond Avalanche, I really don't think anyone else has focused on it in the way that we have. And thankfully, for one of the noticeable differences between other chains is the amount that we actually have kind of live here. So Franklin Templeton's Benji token is live on Stellar. It's also live on Polygon, and I think this is one of the most untalked about use cases when it comes to tokenization, in that the forward-looking nature of Franklin Templeton when it comes to how Benji is going to be used throughout kind of ecosystems is pretty incredible. I also think that when we look at the private equity side and tokenization side, I think we have focused quite a bit on being in front of the U.S. Private equity firms and funds that are going to be looking to tokenize. And that puts us in a very strong position when they start feeling even more comfortable from a regulatory perspective. But at the same time, we really haven't stopped paying attention offshore. I think if we look in Korea, for example, we have Murray that decided to use Polygon to tokenize securities over there. We had an initiative that we did with the MAS in Singapore around a CBDC pilot that happened earlier this year. And so overall, what we see is continued desire to do this. And unlike past years where I think it was a lot of testing, but nothing really happening, this is the first year where I can say, okay, we actually have folks that are using the blockchain technology in a way that makes sense for tokenization. And I think Benji's probably the best example of this. And I think we're going to see many more examples in 2024 happening on Polygon.
Polygon 2.0, a little bit about the migration, how this is going to happen, what's going to happen to the tokens. Kind of walk us through that a little bit, because I think a lot of people are still maybe not completely understanding that.
Yeah, so Polygon 2.0 is first that vision that I mentioned of really having these separate chains that come together. But there's multiple parts of that. For that to happen, one thing that we want is Polygon POS to be part of that equation and be part of that. And so what we need to do is we need to upgrade it to become a Validium so that it uses that ZK technology as well. And so that's one of the parts of Polygon 2.0 that we're going to see happen next year that ends up being important. The second part is this interoperability layer that we talked about earlier that's going to allow Polygon ZK VM, Polygon POS when it's upgraded to a Validium, and all these CDK chains to be interconnected. The third part of this is what we refer to as the staking hub. And basically what we're doing is we're creating, effectively as it says, is a hub that is going to allow all of these different chains that want to decentralize to have a place to do that. So when you have a Polygon CDK that uses a centralized sequencer, a centralized prover, and they say, hey, we don't want those to be centralized. We actually want them to be decentralized. We need a way to do that. What they can do, whether they have a token of their own or not, they can go to this staking hub and they can use the set of validators that currently exist for Polygon POS, but that will be available there so that they can go ahead and actually use them for decentralization. And so what we're going to do to help facilitate that is we want to create a certain amount of emissions in the MATIC token. The problem is the MATIC token as it exists right now is not an upgradable token. So we literally can't create emissions in the MATIC token. So for technical reasons, what we really need to do is we need to upgrade MATIC. And we're upgrading MATIC and changing its name to POL. And basically what that does is through that upgrade, which essentially ends up causing people to change their MATIC for POL, what you get is you get a token that now is going to be emitted through the staking hub. And as those emissions come up, these new chains that plug in can end up paying validators with that POL as that emission to end up decentralizing. Obviously, gas fees will also go to these validators when POL is staked over there. And so that ends up kind of creating broader use for the POL kind of / MATIC token. Once it ends up kind of essentially validators are getting paid by like a series of networks rather than right now it's just Polygon POS. And then lastly, of course, is we will be launching Polygon Maiden next year. And I don't think we need to get into that because it has pretty complex, different architecture, doesn't use the EVM, uses the Maiden VM instead. But that is going to allow for a series of transactions, both around like privacy and speed, that frankly can't be done anywhere in the Polygon ecosystem, and I'm not sure it can be done anywhere else in the blockchain space right now. That'll launch, and it also will use ZK technology and be part of the entire Polygon 2.0 vision.
Yeah, I would invite everybody, if you guys have not gone over to Polygon Technology, go over and check out their 2.0 roadmap, because it gives you a pretty good, layer of understanding quickly how this is going to work. And there's a lot of people I know that are, they're token holders and follow our show in a big way and are big fans of Polygon. So check that out. Definitely in a very interesting place. Marc, it's been great talking with you today. Thank you so much for coming in, and I think being very upfront with us, because that's one of the things, sometimes projects will dodge us a little bit on telling us what's really happening. So it's good that you were candid and upfront. We appreciate that.
Oh, thanks for having me, and I'm always happy to transparently share information.
Good. Well, we're going to be watching very closely, so hopefully we'll be reaching back out as things start to transpire on these CDKs for sure. But anyway, thanks for coming in today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so you guys maybe are listening in over on the podcast side of things. Make sure and get over here to the YouTube channel. It's really one of the best places to catch additional alpha. And the way that we do it is by our Diamond Circle. And what we do within the Diamond Circle is we do a couple more podcasts, a lot more research, all sorts of things, as well as our own market sentiment indicators that we do over there, which is all of our sentiment stuff. Make sure and check that out. Just click the link down below. If you guys want to join me out there on Twitter or X, it's @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.